Hello, my name is Julie Pemble and welcome to the Fire Management Operations Station here at Forestry Expo. I am on the Flathead National Forest, part of the Forest Service on the Tally Lake Ranger District. And we are here today to talk to you about all things fire. All right, so fire, what do we know about fire? There is a fire triangle. As you can see, you always need 3 parts of the triangle to make fire happen. We have oxygen, heat, and fuel. If you take away any one of those sides, we don't have fire. So as firefighters, which is what we're going to talk about, their whole job is to take away one side of the fire triangle. And they have many different ways of doing it. So first of all, we have heat. What are some sources of heat that we can talk about that would start a fire? Well, we have the natural source, which is lightning, and we have the not natural source, which is human caused, such as an escaped fire, a campfire, or maybe a careless cigarette. So there's a couple different ways a fire can start. Here in Montana, we usually have natural cause fire in the summertime when it's dry and hot. And lightning is a major cause of fires around here. So let's go ahead and show you what could happen if we have a lightning strike and we took away one side of the fire, the oxygen side. So here we are, it's the middle of the summer. We have a tree in the woods that is caught on fire here because of lightning. And we're going to go ahead and take away one side of the fire triangle. What are we taking away here? We're taking away the air. So do we expect that this fire in the woods is going to get bigger or smaller? Slowly taking it away, and eventually the fire will go out. We have taken away one side of the fire triangle, and that is one of the ways we put out fires. Firefighters also use lots of different tools to go ahead and take away fire, and I actually have a firefighter here that can demonstrate some of the tools that they use. So this is David.
Hello.
And he is showing us what we call a Pulaski. And a Pulaski can take away the fuel side of the fire in a couple different ways here. Right here we have the grubbing hoe, so we can go ahead and remove the fuels along the ground by bringing it down to exposed dirt, to mineral soil. And here we have the axe portion of it that you could take down small trees, which could be the fuel in front of the fire. Another tool we have here is a shovel. Same thing. What you could also do here is go ahead and scoop up some dirt and put it on the fire, and you're smothering it. Again, you're taking away one side of the fire triangle on that air component. A lot of other tools we can use here too. We've got a bag of water that they actually carry into the fire, nice backpack. Bring it all the way in and go ahead and spray it. And what side would we be taking away? If we added water to the fire, we'd be taking away the heat portion as well as smothering it. Excellent. We also use other tools, specialized tools such as chainsaws to go ahead and cut down the fuel that's in front of the fire. What else? So then there's also fire. Is all fire bad? No, not all fire is bad. In fact, as a management tool, we sometimes start fires. And we do that to reduce the fuels, so in case of a fire does come. This here is called a drip torch. It's usually filled up with different types of fuels, and you go ahead and drop the fire on the ground to either start an intentional prescribed fire, or we'll use it in a wildland situation to burn the fuels out in front of an oncoming fire. Again, if we remove the fuels, once that fire hits it, there will be no more fuels to burn. Another tool that the firefighter carries on a daily basis that they hope that they never have to use is something called a fire shelter. And this is in case they can't escape a wildland fire situation. It's something that they carry in their pack, and they would deploy it in a situation. And this is what it looks like back here. It's a reflective type material that can withstand certain types of heat and would protect their lungs from the smoke. So again, a very important tool that they hope that they never have to use. Excellent. So as we look around here in our forest, we have different types of fuels. We've got tall trees and big trees and small trees, and then some of this lower stuff here on the ground that we call ladder fuels. And so if a fire started in this situation, you can kind of predict how it might react. It would start here on the forest floor, which you can see has an accumulation of fuels buildup, and it would go up to the next layer, these smaller type trees, ladder fuels, up into the tops of the trees, which are the canopies. And if it gets going fast enough, and if your trees are close enough together, you could have something called a canopy fire. So in that kind of situation, you could lose most of this whole forest right here, which is why we usually go in and do land management and remove some of the fuels before that can happen. We want to go ahead and change the fuel composition, and so when a fire does hit, it's not as severe. Because as again, when we said with the prescribed burns, not all fires are bad. If we set fire on our own terms, it can be beneficial. It helps prep the seed bed, the soil for additional plants to grow, to create browse for animals. And there's actually certain types of trees that can only grow if their cones have fire. They're called Serotoninous cones. They're from a lodgepole pine tree. So the lodgepole pine tree's cone is bound up really, really tight by lots and lots of resin. And it needs a certain amount of fire to hit it to open up and let all the seeds inside out. And therefore it takes very hot fires to create stand replacing fires for lodgepole pine. So they're kind of a unique tree that has adapted here in Montana with fire. We have a lot of other trees that have adapted. I'll take this one here. So this right here is an example of what we call a cookie, a slice of a tree. And this tree can tell me its whole life just by looking at this right here. So we can see right here that this is the very beginning of the tree. This is called the pith, the center of the tree. This is when it was born. Then as you can see, it has lots and lots of rings close together, really tight. And then something happened right in here. And all of a sudden the rings are really, really far apart. What do you think happened to this tree? Well, what this is called a fire scar. And so what happened was the tree was really growing up really close to lots of friends and tight with all of its neighbors. And it was competing for water and moisture and air and space. And so it was having a pretty tough life and going really slow. All of a sudden, fire came in. And what it did was it killed maybe some of its neighbors around him. He's lucky that he had a defense mechanism. If you look right here, this has got a very, very thick bark on it, which is what helps protect it from the fire. So if a fire is coming along, and it's a low intensity fire, it would hit this bark, and this bark is protecting the inside of the tree, and so it won't die. But what it did was it killed off some of his neighbors. So then he had a pretty good life here and was growing pretty fast before he was cut down. So this is an example of a defense mechanism that some trees have here in Montana to resist fire. I'll take an example of the cedar tree over here. This is an example of a tree that is not very resistant to fire. Again, you can see just how thin that bark is there. It doesn't have very much protection against fire. But this tree has a different type of adaptation. It grows in wet spots. So therefore, it's not going to be as susceptible to those big fires if it's growing already in a wet area. So as you can tell, lots of trees have lots of different defense mechanisms. Welcome to our fire demonstration. What we have here is an example of any place in Montana. We've got big, beautiful mountains with trees on them surrounding a nice lake, and some homes here scattered throughout. So what we use this table for is to demonstrate the different ways that fire could occur on the landscape in a safe, controlled manner. We have set this demonstration up just to show you examples. You should never do this at home. I repeat, never play with matches. So what we're going to do here is first talk about people that choose to live in the forest. So I live in the forest, and what I've done is I've taken the time to clear around my house to create a defensible space. What is a defensible space? It's an area that is cleared of any debris within a certain amount of radius of your house. So if a fire does occur, your house remains safe. So if you look right here, these people that live in the woods have done some really good defensible space. If you look adjacent to them, I would call this not defensible space. They have lots of tree litter down around the bottoms of their trees. Trees are right up against their house here. And it also creates a situation that's dangerous for firefighters with what we call one way in, one way out. So as you can see here, these green lines represent roads. And so if there was an emergency situation, the emergency vehicles are coming in, but they have no place to get back out. So if they've responded to it as emergency up here and a tree falls across the road, they are then trapped in that situation. So that's one of the things that as firefighters they evaluate before they respond to an emergency situation is the safety of the firefighters, as well as if the people have taken the time to create a defensible space around their house. Very important. So if you live in the forest, make sure you have a conversation about how your defensible space is around your house. Excellent. So what we're going to do here is show an example of a hot summer day, and we get those dry lightning storms that come through. And what we're going to do is create a lightning strike adjacent to one of these houses right here, and let's see what the reaction is. Do you think it's going to be no big deal and the fire just kind of does nothing? Or do you think that because it's right there up against that house, that house has a chance to burn down? So as you can see, pretty severe reaction just from that one lightning strike against that house right there. So again, these firefighters are responding in there, and they've put themselves in a dangerous situation to go ahead and respond to that one house that did not have the defensible space. So over in this area, we have houses that have taken the time to create the defensible space around them. So it's that same storm passing through. In the summer, you get another lightning strike. Let's see what happens when a lightning strike happens next to a tree adjacent to a house with a defensible space. Pretty noticeable fire activity difference there. Which house would you rather be living in? I think I'd like to be living right about here right now in this safe spot. We'll just let that burn out. Another thing that affects fire severity is what we call topography. So as you can see, we've got a little bit of a slope right here, and the trees are on an angle. So with the wind that could be coming off the lake right now, it's getting pushed back further and further into other people's properties. So we've lost another house here, and it just keeps on going. So as fire managers and land managers, what we do, is we get out and we try to remove that fire triangle, right? We go ahead and we remove the fuel bed to make bare land, and so the fire stops spreading. So if we get in there with some heavy equipment and remove that fuel right there, that fire doesn't have anything to run into, and that can help stop it. So as you can see, pretty destructive with just one lightning strike in the woods. All right, so some other areas we can show in the forest here are an example of places that we have already treated. So if you look over here, this tree spacing in between this compared to over here is a lot different. So what's happened is some firefighters have got in here and done what we call a fuels reduction project. They've taken out some of those ladder fuels that we discussed and cleaned out a lot of the litter that's on the floor. And so again, if a fire would start in here, you're not going to get much fire behavior activity. Sorry, it's on your side. So again, it's that same hot lightning summer day, and you get a lightning strike in that managed piece of land, and you're not going to see much fire activity. Maybe a small group of trees burns down. Maybe it drops down to the ground and cleans up some of that litter along the floor, the tree litter. But you're not going to get severe activity. So now we've got one dead tree right there, which is called a snag. And snags, some snags in the forest are good, right? They are habitat for certain critters like owls and woodpeckers. So again, a couple of dead standing trees that are not considered fuel in the forest, but they're actually good for the environment. All right, so in the summertime in Montana, people love to go camping. I know I do. One of the things that I love to do when I go camping is have a fire. So here is an example of a nice little campfire here right along the lake. Someone roasted some marshmallows, and then what did they do? They walked away from it, and they did not put it out correctly. Remember, when we're putting out a fire, we need to take away one side of the fire triangle. So if they had thrown a bucket of water on it, that would have smothered it and taken away the heat, or they could have thrown some dirt on it and mixed around, which would have taken away the fuel. So what happened is they walked away, and it was a big gust of wind that came up from the lake, and it took and spread some embers back behind it. And back behind the campfire is a stand of lodgepole trees. And they are in really, really close together, and the tops of their trees, the crowns of their trees are touching. And so what you're seeing happen is how fast it can spread. What we have here is it started on the ground and it went up into the crowns of the trees, and now we have a running crown fire. And you can see just how fast it can happen. That's why it is so important to put out your campfires. But we talked about the lodgepole earlier, and it has a very important feature that has made it adapted to fire. It has these serotoninous cones. So again, right here, this cone is all closed up tight with sap. And the heat from this fire right now is causing all of these to open up and drop the seeds into the newly prepared ground, and a whole new stand of lodgepole pines will start from this fire. But you can see just how fast it gets out of hand. So now it's gone from the lodgepole pine forest into the adjacent forest. And because that is an unmanaged land, it is spreading rapidly. There's some situations that a firefighter may not just respond to a fire, and this would be maybe a case if they wanted some of that fuel to be removed. They might just go ahead and let that fire burn for ecological benefits. But with the right conditions, it's just going to keep going because there's no natural barriers, right? That it could burn all of this up and it won't stop until it gets over here to this managed forest. So again, this demonstration is to be used just to show you how fast fire can happen in the woods with the right condition, and why we need to be so careful with fire. All right, so we have finished our fire demonstration here, and we're just going to go ahead and talk about the different things that we saw. So again, we've got the houses over here that had the defensible space, and when the lightning struck occur over here, we didn't have any big fire reactions. Here we've got the houses that did not have defensible space, and when the lightning strike occurred, it did unfortunately take out a few houses, and the firefighters were put at risk when responding. Over here we had the escaped campfire with the lodgepole pine stand behind it, and as you can tell, we had something called a stand replacing fire, and all the trees have died. But again, those serotoninous cones have done their jobs, and we're going to have a new stand of lodgepole pine there. And over here we had our unmanaged land, which the fire kind of went through naturally using the topography until it kind of put itself out. So again, these were all different examples of how fire is on the landscape. And again, I would just say you must be careful with fire out there on the landscape, because as you can see, things can happen quite fast. So fifth graders, as you're heading into summer, we want you to have a fun, safe summer. So remember, if you're having a campfire, always have the appropriate tools to put it out. You want to smother it with water, and you want to take a shovel and go ahead and stir it up. If it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave. So remember, Smokey says, only you.